I'm gonna make a guess, and I could be entirely wrong, that you opened up this video because of the title. And perhaps the title is confusing to you, or maybe it's something that entirely resonates with you and you want to know more about it, or perhaps it even offends you. Um, I just spoke with a friend about a certain topic that's going on in the world today, and they had posted something to their Instagram story about urging people to talk about it, talk about it, talk about it. And then somebody said, don't police, don't police my speech. Don't tell me what to do or not to do. And they issued an apology, um, and it's really in the vein of we can't control what anybody says or does, but we can observe it and we can study it. So those are things that are within our control. And when you see the title of this, it was taken from a sign that was held up recently by a protester that said, "Your silence will be studied by your grandchildren." And the several things that we can take away from it literally are somebody's silence, that silence will be studied, and it won't happen now, it won't happen later, but it'll happen perhaps years from now, maybe decades, somebody's grandchildren. And the reason that is because when certain things happen that are so bright, so intense, so violent, that it stirs people to have to say something or feel that they have to say something. Nobody has to do anything. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to remain silent. You don't even have to acknowledge it, really. And the sign is essentially saying that because somebody is silent about, whatever the issue the protester was addressing, it'll be so egregious, it's so apparent that their grandchildren will study it. And that would strike to me as something fairly devastating or huge happening in the world, for somebody to stay silent about it. And from my experience, I worked at I would call it a worldwide broadcasting media group, whatever you want to call it, PBS. And I live in Minneapolis. And when George Floyd was murdered by the Minneapolis Police Department, there was, a fair amount of people that got into the streets, and a lot of people that spoke, a lot of people that posted, a lot of people that had conversations, a lot of people that were driven to talk, even if they disagreed with George Floyd, even if they didn't think that the trial was fair, even if they didn't think that Derek Chauvin did it. The event was so impactful that it pulled everybody to their feet. And the media group that I was working for at the time, a week had passed before they had said anything. And at that point, I grew very frustrated with the leadership there. And there was a saying that somebody told me, or I heard somewhere, and I understand you've probably heard actions speak louder than words, right? And somebody told me silence speaks louder than words. Silence speaks louder than words. And that stuck with me for a very long time. And I didn't really understand it until I started to look at the long-term perceivable game that certain people were playing in being silent. There's always a cost and there's always a payoff. And for this particular media group, and for a lot of people that were quiet about what happened in Minneapolis and turned into an international uprising, was the cost was you clearly don't care about the people that you say you care about. And you're quite all right doing a documentary on something that, is about an event that happened 100 years later. However, when it's something that happened a week ago, you're not willing to speak up on it. And what does that say about somebody or a system that feels more comfortable speaking on something 200 years ago, but not something 2 days ago? What is the payoff there? What is the payoff for that system, for that institution? And I think it really takes investigation and just a keen eye to look at that and to wonder, okay, what is their payoff? Why are they saying that? As opposed to, what are they saying? Why are they saying it? And when I look at the sign, your silence will be studied by your grandchildren, for me, it reeks of a lot of people that say that, during the civil rights movement, they're like, I would have been out there. I would have been out there. Um, Even in war, a lot of people are like, wow, I would have stood up for my country. I would have done it. I would have done it. But you don't really know until you were there, do you? I carry this dog tag from my great-great-grandfather, who was in World War I. And if you know anything about World War I, it was an awful, awful, violent, extremely, extremely violent war. And it took a lot of lives. And I can't imagine what my great-great-grandfather experienced or what he was feeling going into it. And I can't sit here and say that, yeah, I would have gone in with him. I don't know. But people today that say, I would have, marched in Selma, or I would have been there. Can you really say that? Would you have really done it? With the stakes as high as they were, with the violence as present as it was, would you have really done it? And I think we need to ask ourselves, what is our silence today? What are we being silent about right now? What are we dismissing wholeheartedly? And I think that a lot of the topics and the events happening right now, it's not necessarily a case of you should speak on this or you should say this. It's more so, here, I'm going to give you something to know, and then you can choose to do with it what you will. That's what I do with a lot of the information here. But understand that the silence comes with a cost. And you have to ask yourself, when certain atrocities were happening and certain economics were tilted by enslavement, how did it stay or remain or sustain there? Well, probably by a lot of people being complicit with it, or being okay with it, or not talking about it. And when you don't talk about it, it just stays there. And that's about it. And that's all that happens. It just remains to be what it's going to be. And perhaps that's kind of the lesson I learned from PBS, was they weren't necessarily interested in today's issues or talking about what's happening right now. And I think about that a lot. I think about it all the time, actually. What is the price of silence? Because when we look at reactions to anything, a lot of people say there's only subjective and objective. And I would challenge you to really research the third. So I always tell people, if the Twins, the Minnesota Twins, it's a baseball team here, if they lost a game yesterday, and I said, hey, what did you think about that game? And you gave a subjective answer, you'd say, man, we blew all the money on so-and-so and this pitching here, a lot of opinions, right? Objectively, you would answer, no, they lost 3-2. But then the third answer is, who are the Twins? What's baseball? And the third answer is dismissal. And it then puts the onus upon the person speaking or delivering the topic to the platform, to the table. They then are burdened with the action of having to explain who the Twins are and what baseball is. And so when people say, what prejudice, what economics, what disparity, it puts the person in a position to have to explain what that is, and they have to double down on it. And I always go back to a movie. It was a Leonardo DiCaprio movie. I believe it was The Beach or The Island. Somebody can correct me in the comments on this one. And they're on this island. It's beautiful, and they're all, their friends are all there, and I think it's like off of like the coast of somewhere in Southeast Asia, and they're enjoying themselves, and they found this secret island, and somebody gets bit by a shark, and Leo's like, oh no, oh my gosh. And they take the body and they drag it to the other side of the island, and they come back. Leonardo DiCaprio says, well, what happened? They said, oh, he's fine, or something dismissive. And come to find out at the end, all they did with the body was just drag it to the other side of the island and leave it there. Because I believe it was one of two things. They couldn't have that person giving up their location, and two, they didn't want to hear the moaning and the screaming and the pain. And the payoff is immediate. I don't have to hear this. I don't have to deal with this. But the cost is somebody else suffering. And that suffering, if you go deep enough, is intertwined with your livelihood as well. I believe Paul Wellstone, he said, we all do better when we all do better. And I've always loved that quote because it holds so true. And it's not something you can really see immediately or feel immediately, but you can know it in the long term. You can know it in the long game. And it was something that one of my grandparents really, really took to the grave and preached all the time. Not exactly Paul Wellstone, but was really an advocate for supporting everybody around them, which meant that they were supporting themselves. And so I go back to this idea of a dismissive or a silent answer. I think the biggest question in that is, why is there silence? And what is the comfort that's being gained from it? What do you really believe, or what does somebody really believe is going to be a payoff from this? And does it truly mean you'll never have to talk about it? If you look away from it long enough, it'll just go away, because that's not how it works. And I think a lot of times, a lot of institutions and systems and businesses have thought if we look away long enough, it'll go away. But it doesn't. In fact, when you look away from it, it grows. And so I really challenge you to look at, in your life, what are you being silent about? It's not even like a topic or, a news topic or a headline on the internet or anything like that. It's, what have you believed you benefited from by being silent about? And then what can be the benefit or the long-term gain or building of speaking on it?